Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I'm one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammie. Hey there, Cammie.
Hey, Bryant.
What's going on? How are you?
I am fantastic. I just started the Netflix series Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, Kinley wanted to watch that, and we did start it, and it's just teetering on the edge of inappropriate for her, so that's
Right.
fine.
Well, I was thinking like maybe a 10-year-old, but I don't know.
Yes, some of the bits she's kind of like, but she's loving the attitude. That
What
is really
is
good.
so funny about it to me is like it was written for a millennial.
Yes.
Is what it feels like. Like this is a teen show written for a millennial.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. No, that's good you said. I actually wanted to mention this too. I listened to a really good. I felt in the mood for an autobiography, so I listened to a good short one that's relatively newer on Ulysses S. Grant,
Oh, cool.
um, by Michael Korda with a K. And that, yeah, it was really funny. It came out, at least the audiobook came out in 2020, so it was relatively newer, a little shorter. A lot of them are like super long, and he was a good guy. I was listening, and I was like, I wonder if there's something we can do from this. And you know what we could do? The myth of how the South was going to win that damn war. How about that? How about that? No, it was really cool. He was a cool dude. Died of throat cancer. Too many cigars.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Don't chain smoke cigars, y'all. Even if you're winning the South.
Right.
Okay. Bad idea. Well, that's not a bad segue to what our topic is. Rewind the clock about 300 years from Mr. Grant, former president. And we're going to talk about Roanoke, Virginia, right?
No.
No.
North Carolina.
Nothing special going on in Virginia regarding Roanoke. Maybe. I don't know. But no, yeah, we're talking about the mystery of the colonists in Roanoke, which is also a place in Virginia, which I think both immediately assumed, oh yeah, Roanoke, Virginia. But then we're like, oh wait, no, it's right above us in North Carolina.
Yeah, I wasn't sure where it really was. Like in my head, it was Virginia because there is an
Right.
existing Roanoke, Virginia, and
Yeah.
probably because of Jamestown.
Right. That's a good point too. Yeah. No, this is cool. So, yeah, a lot of people might be familiar. This is an interesting early settlement. This is like right on the precipice, right before the 16th century kicks off. So this is super early in the colonial development of the New World, as it were called. So as we do on Mystery, Cammie's going to give us a story, nice and spooky, about these colonists, and then I'll lead a brief discussion on this, and we'll figure it out. We'll solve it today. We won't.
Maybe.
All right. Well, maybe I'll have a Hermes Thrice Great inspired. Wait, there must be over there. Well, maybe we'll figure it out. But either way, Cammie, why don't you hit us with that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used WilliamsburgPrivateTours.com and BritishExplorers.com, which had a great timeline. So it was really easy to kind of go in and figure out when the stuff was happening because you learn about the stuff in
That's
school,
awesome.
but it was so long ago that you're kind of like, okay,
Sure.
was this really the first settlement they tried to do and all of that? So
BritishExplorers.com. I wonder what kind of traffic that gets nowadays.
British Explorers.
.com. Yeah, that's an interesting website. Some English kid I'm gonna find something new, and he goes there and he's like, wait,
Maybe
never mind.
it really looks like an Angel Fire page. Like it is
Oh,
very
that yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe it's just somebody still paying for it, or maybe it was, like, at the time of the internet where you didn't have to pay for anything, I'm not
Right.
really sure, but it's still up, and it's, getting traffic from me, at least. This wasn't the first settlement Sir Walter O'Reilly had planned on this very spot, but it was as though the land itself was cursed. In 1585, the colony of Roanoke broke ground after a long 3 months at sea. The colonists arrived in late July, which put them too late to plant crops. They had to depend on hunting and the kindness of the indigenous people who lived nearby, but it wasn't long before the ships began to leave, and only just over 100 people remained, one of them being Ralph Lane. He was a brutal man and wished to put the resources of the original inhabitants of the land to his personal use. This caused tensions between the Europeans and the indigenous people of the New World. With Lane's leadership, the colonists were soon starving, and as soon as Sir Francis Drake visited the budding colony, the people begged to be taken back to England. Only 15 men remain, and their fates are unknown to this day. So here we are, a new colony. It was Raleigh who was still hell bent on establishing a footing in the Americas. While they had planned to settle farther north, one of his captains disobeyed his orders and landed on the old colony of Roanoke. There, he, along with over 100 others, established their home in a place where the first had disappeared some years earlier. But in late August, John White sailed to England for more supplies, leaving 112 people on the island. He meant to return within a few months, but the war with Spain prevented him from getting back quickly. It was 3 years before he would be able to see his people again. And when relief did finally come, the men saw smoke bellowing from the town, so they fired a cannon shot to announce their arrival. While trying to disembark, 6 men, the captain included, drowned. And when they made it to the place where the people should have been, there was nothing but a skeleton waiting for them. And carved into a tree, the cryptic message, Croatoan. And so White pushed on, looking for his lost people, his wife, his daughter. But when they set sail for the place called Croatoan, one of the ship's cables broke and put them with only one anchor. Their food stores were not enough to keep pressing onward, so they were never able to search that land, and they turned tide back for homeland. Some say, though, that the people of Roanoke fared well and were not lost at all. For when more settlers came to the area, they wrote of the fair haired and gray eyed people of the land who spoke English as well as the Queen herself.
Oh, as well as the Queen. That's cool. Yeah,
They
that
literally said, as the Queen. Yeah.
oh, that's funny. That reminds me of there was the like Southeast Asian trade, probably 100 years before this or even more. So I think it was some like English settlers bumped into some indigenous peoples of Southeast Asia in the chain of islands that are there,
Yeah.
and they spoke English, but it was from like the Dutch or something. I don't know. It was like from someone else, and they're like, "Wait, you know English?" So that made trading a lot easier. Yeah, this is an interesting uh, early colony settlement, right? 1585 is when it kind of started, but it didn't really kind of get going until 1587, and that's where things went sour or weird. The big mystery here is there wasn't really any evidence. It didn't seem like they really put their like feet down there, like planted themselves in super well. But they did abandon it. It was about 120 colonists, all men. I didn't realize this until I looked into it. I would have just guessed, but it was all workers. They were just trying to get this established, get a foothold. But they needed supplies, and so yeah, Walter Raleigh, he actually ended up uh, going. He wanted the city to be established. He put in Ralph Lane and John White were the initial governors. Lane actually hooked up with a resupply mission with Sir Richard Grenville, and Sir Francis Drake helped out. Actually, all these dudes are sirs. Man, it took nothing to get united back then. Um, and during that uh, attempt, when Drake was taking them for the resupplying, that's when the disappearance happened. And you're right, yeah, the Anglo-Spanish War was going on, so a resupply mission that would have taken maybe a year took even longer. And so it was weird. And then when they come back, nothing's there. Some cryptic messages. You assume that they went to the island of Croatoa nearby. There was also another one, a tree that had Cora inscribed on it. I'll get to that later. That was like I think on the other side of the settlement of where it was. So I mainly just kind of did Wikipedia here. I some things that I like, some assumptions that I kind of changed. So yeah, this is Dare County, New North Carolina today. It was inspired directly after the founding of St. John's in Newfoundland by Sir Humphrey Gilbert, who was actually lost at sea on his return voyage. But Queen Elizabeth wanted him to kind of do something else. Walter Raleigh was like, "Yeah, I'll take care of that." And so that's where Roanoke kind of got inspired was from this. This is important at the time. These colonies, you'd have these merchants or these dudes who would basically petition to the wealthy and be like, "Yo, I'll do this for you in your name, but you got to fund it and stuff like that." It was really expensive. You need lots of people, all this uncharted territory. But there were these people having success, and the success in Canada was expediting this. And it's really interesting to see. I mean, you literally have these dudes, English, Portuguese, Italian people, go around to all the crowns of the French, the Spanish, Portugal, England. They'd be like, hey, they'd petition to each one, and it's just kind of it's kind of crazy to think about. That's how it went back, but that's how it was done. So the Greenville went back, had these men stay, and then they were gone. There's really part of the big mystery is there's not a lot of writing until later, when George Bancroft in 1834 wrote a book called A History of the United States. That he brought this story up, and he kind of put it in a good light. He lionizes the term. What Wikipedia uses. He lionized the colonists, said that they were valiant and brave, and this is unknown territory. And that's kind of when it piqued interest again. And then it kind of died down again until a little bit later, when we have sort of the modern technology, National Park Services that protected certain things. But there really weren't any references until about 10 years later. 1605 is when we've got some mentions of this. And there are people who write about, they say, Native Americans or indigenous peoples with European features. Kind of like how Cammie mentioned. I didn't see that specific part where they spoke English specifically, but I think I mentioned this before too on one of our other shows where we've talked about in the similar time period. When I took a colonial Latin American history course, one like thing that especially the Spanish and perhaps the Portuguese would do, one trick that they would have, because they'd be kind of like hopping the coast, they would like, if they found like a settlement of peoples, they would like leave a sailor or two with them and be like, hey, assimilate. We'll see you in a couple months or years. Hopefully you'll learn the language and start up relationships. So it's not like crazy unheard of for that to happen, this assimilation. And I mean, if you're like screwed, if you don't have a boat to get back, you want to survive, you're just going to keep going. So, and another thing too, while the indigenous peoples were hostile eventually in many ways, things were pretty copacetic initially. I mean, trade was great, especially at the very beginning when you have these items to trade that they've never seen before. And so things were good. But as supplies got tighter, that's when relationships were really bad, when they relied and couldn't really trade anything else, or when they were useless settlers that had nothing to do, and they were depending on the resources of their neighbors there.
I
That
saw
was one
that
thing.
the one governor, Ralph Lane, who was the one who basically caused the settlers to start starving because of his relationship with the indigenous people.
Yeah.
He was like very, they quote unquote militaristic in his tactics. So
Mm-hmm.
he just was very tenacious and wouldn't stop, and caused rife between them, because they were trying to fight these people instead of and take things instead of like trade or
Yeah.
help in some way.
Yeah, so I don't want it to seem like it was like hard from the get go. We talked about the Vikings in Vinland and stuff too. Their encounters, they were pretty hostile, but they were both kind of hostile initially. But there was also some good trading. They were all chill with each other a lot as well. So it wasn't always like heated from the get go. They would There was trade. They were good to start. Things got worse later as the colonists kind of settled. So yeah, we don't have too much other evidence really to go off of any of this. The big thing is that I want people to walk away with is George Bancroft's book on it was really what helped keep the story alive and also change our idea on it. Sir Walter Raleigh was knighted in directly because of this. These adventures, this founding, even though it wasn't that good.
Well, I also saw that he was so important to the queen because he was so able to get these crews together and willing,
Sure.
like willing men to go and do this, that he was not allowed to leave England. Like he wasn't allowed to go on
Too
these
valuable.
expeditions. Mhm.
Oh, that's funny. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, you don't know when a privateer is gonna take you, and you're screwed. I mean, the bounty that Francis Drake had was immense from the Spanish. I remember that. If I don't know if you remember us on that episode that we talked about him.
Yeah, that's why
Um,
she knighted him. Yeah.
hmm No, that's a good point. Yeah. Hey, stick here, homie. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. He's living proof. So that would make sense. Yeah, I made I was really interested to see the different nationalities petitioning different kings. It was very fluid. You'd think it would be much more like English to English, Spanish to Spanish, but there were all these dudes petitioning all these other kings and queens and royalty to get this going on. Upon their return to England in the autumn of 1584, Amadas and Barlow spoke highly of the tribe's hospitality and the strategic location of Roanoke. Okay, yeah, that was a note I got from Wikipedia that talked about that these guys who went for the relief mission, they came back and they were talking about how nice the people were there, and then how strategic Roanoke was. Now they might be BSing just to help get more people to come on down and labor this. That could absolutely be the case. 1587 was when Raleigh was established. The relief mission was a year later. We even have I think documents on Spanish intel regarding it too. They were like spying on it. The relief party came back in 1590, so it took them 2 years to even make it back. And that's when we come back and see Roanoke, or sorry, Croatoan written, which that's a nearby island that I think was doing well, but it doesn't look like that.
Yeah, it was like from my research for the
Yeah.
other, it looked like it was an island that some established indigenous people who lived with the colony, because
Mhm.
the first part, Raleigh was or not Raleigh, I'm sorry, White took back two people to England that were originally inhabitants of the Americas, and they like kind of went on this tour of England, and Raleigh was like,
Oh,
"Look, here's some
yeah.
people, and here's what they're about, and then can I have
Yeah.
more money and all of this." So then when they came back, they were friendly with the colonists.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some
So
further
that
notes.
they lived basically, they were from that area, the
Right.
Croatoan area.
Yeah. There's some other like evidence of it comes from like the famous John Smith and the settlement of Jamestown in 1607. He was captured by Chief Powhatan. That's where it looks like Smith, from his experience with communicating with them, they spoke of people from a place called Okanahonen, where men, and this is in quotes, wore European style clothing, featuring walled houses. Smith later returned to the colony. Yeah, and then heard of another place of people who wore apparently European dress. So it looks like Smith would hear from uh, natives himself when he was communicating with them. They would say, "Oh yeah, there's European looking dudes over here in this area." So that's kind of like an idea that we have. That's where the idea comes of them kind of splitting and assimilating, and not just being wiped out. I think that's one point I didn't clearly spell out. This doesn't seem like it was like genocide, just colony wipeout, that kind of thing. The colony was wiped out because they all left, because there was just greener, there was survivability. You had to move on. You had to go somewhere else. And there were there were established colonies, and you live there long enough, and you assimilate. It works out. So yeah, I mentioned that book, A History of America. That's what helped it. In 1941, the National Park Service actually started administering the area and declared it a historic site. And they tried to reconstruct like an area in its image. A big thing, other than some of these writings, so many of the artifacts that are from this like time period, they could have been from like really any other time period. They could have been from indigenous peoples who traded with people from other areas. So like you can't tell like, oh, this is a Roanoke colonist, this and that. It's so hard to tell that that's the way it was. It's also been very sensationalized, so it's a cool mystery. You're gonna hear it. You're gonna see it on those TV shows and stupid podcasts that talk about it. And so it's very sensationalized. There are some really cool. I don't think I saved them. There's been some cool like books written about it. There was one. Oh man, I'm gonna find it. I'll write it in the description. It was like the plot is that there's a vampire, and the vampire's name is like Cora something. Like it's like and someone's like trying to write Cora, like his name on a tree, but he gets
And
killed as
it's
he's
like
like,
this ancient European vampire that stowed away on the ship or something,
yes,
like
yeah,
Dracula, but
yep,
okay, that's
100%. That's the
amazing.
story. Yeah, no, it's actually kind of pretty rad. So there's been some cool like things based off of it. A comic book, maybe that was a comic instead of a novel, but there's been quite a few things like based on it that were pretty awesome. There's been a few other
Oh,
things too. Oh yeah, go for it.
American Horror Story did a whole season on it.
That's right. That is right. Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah, I've never watched, but I have seen that for sure.
Don't watch.
Uh,
It's just gross. The show is just so grotesque.
yeah. Oh, here it is. In 2015 novel, The Last American Vampire. The
Oh,
colonists are the
okay.
victims of a vampire named Crowley. The inspection Crow was thus an incomplete attempt to implicate him. So there we go. That's the Cora tree. A 2009 study to determine the age of the Cora tree was inconclusive. Damage to the tree made it impossible to obtain the valid core sample, even if the tree dates back to the 16th century in establishing the age. Oh, so it might not even be from that. It just might have been.
Yeah, there was an actual writing. There was the writing on the tree, but then there was also writing on the town
Yeah, the Croatoan
plaque.
writing.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's like established factual, good to go. Yeah, that is like pretty straightforward. It is cryptic because it didn't really like give a direct lead, but it gives us pretty direct assumptions, and it's pretty plausible to kind of figure it out. So yeah, that's pretty much like all I've got. There's anthropologist Lee Miller has an idea that that there was a conspiracy against Raleigh to maroon the colonists and kind of like smear campaign on him. Um, and a big thing, Francis Bacon, the writer,
Yum.
politician, yeah, the famous figure. He is actually he wrote publicly against Raleigh for his indifference about it. He apparently was just kind of like, well, that's 120 dudes gone. Sorry, y'all. So I thought that was kind of interesting that in the public limelight at the time, someone was speaking out against that. I wonder how that would have been both ways. I mean, like,
Like
is
how
it
it would have been
good?
received
Yeah.
publicly,
Would the
or
queen would have been like, "Hey, go easy on him. He's just doing his work," or would she want that? Would she want like, no, we want the people who are potential colonists to be like, no, yeah, we care about you for real. It's not that hard. Um, yeah, it was an interesting take, but it was almost forgotten for the most part. Few writings, but some famous ones, like I said, from John Smith. Some big names were involved: Sir Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake. These big players were in like a lot of the same people were the ones that were doing all this stuff back then. It was a pretty like simple group of people that were involved in a lot of this, but we don't really know exactly what happened. We do have evidence that they might have assimilated nearby, and that's about it. They could have somehow find a boat and just gone too. Could have just capsized, and that's it. There's really no traces. So that's the mystery. But
maybe if
life
the
went on,
Spanish were spying, maybe the Spanish picked him up.
and we're like, "You're speaking Spanish now, bud." Yeah, no, I mean, they would have picked him up, made him basically prisoner, workers on a boat, and he died pretty shortly after that. So that totally could be it too. But if they did do that, they didn't leave any evidence. They didn't write it down. No captain was
Sure.
like, "Dear diary, 3 British people got picked up today, and I hate them." But yeah, I think this is a fun topic to kind of jump on. I wish there was a little bit more. Maybe one day we'll see geographical scannings and find there was a mass burial site and it was a vampire, and that'll open up a whole new can of worms on it because they'll have little marks on their neck. But until then, I think that's all I've got to add. Cammie, would you like to put a cherry on top of this podcast?
Sure. I feel like I would be amiss not to bring up
Mm-hmm.
Jamestown, like the original Jamestown
Yeah.
settlement with this, because there were some similarities, although Jamestown was completely mismanaged.
Yeah.
And we could even talk about that probably like later, but
Sure.
if people are kind of confused, because there's with Jamestown there were rumors of like cannibalism and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but since they were so similar time period wise, and they're both established by the British, it can get kind of confusing. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, for sure. No, it is. It's very closely related timeline wise, but it is different enough for sure. These guys were trying to make these. This was a way to make it big, and there was a lot of opportunities, but it was tough and it was wild. So one colony success in Canada made everyone think they could do it again and emulate it, and it wasn't as easy, especially when it takes you a year to resupply. So it was hard. Well, excellent. Let us know what you think about colonization in the New World. I think that's it for this episode, Cammie. If you have any suggestions on what we should talk about, we just had two great bangers on Apollo and Apollo's brother Hermes. So this was a nice little change of pace, but I think we're going into some fun supernatural stuff the next couple weeks. So get ready for that. But Mythstorie with an IE, you can watch us on YouTube or most podcast services. Let us know if you need anything. All right. Well, Cammie, we'll see you next time.
Oh.
Ow.